Hey writers, welcome back to the Write in the Head podcast with me, John Paul Sperling. I'm a screenwriter and a life coach. So this podcast is where we bring those two worlds together, talking about the mindset required to turn that passionate pursuit of writing into a thriving career. Coming up on today's episode. Kyle Prue is an award-winning author, a playwright, a screenwriter, and a poet. Not to mention one of the OG Tik-Tokers, gaining over 1 million followers in just 2 years. Kyle and I go deep on the subject of creating a successful digital series, including a ton of practical takeaways for any writers considering doing the same. Kyle Prue, welcome to the Write in the Head podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. How's it going?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. We are about to dive into something that is so fascinating for me. Somebody who got into screenwriting thinking, I need to write features, I need to write pilots, and that's just about all there is to it. And then I come across these things called digital shows, and I'm now learning that that might be an area to look into. So I'm very excited to be talking to somebody who has a successful digital show, and I think that's the best place to start the conversation. Could you tell us, just for the benefit of the listeners who haven't already dived into the world of Rabbit, tell us a bit about the show, how it came to be, sort of the Rabbit origin story, if you will.
Totally, yeah. So when I first moved out to Los Angeles, it was, kind of the midst of COVID. And I had a writing partner who I still work with to this day, and we were trying to write an entire season of television in a month. And we were kind of using this as a way to, kind of test drive our muscles. I had been a playwright for a long time. I had been a novelist for a long time, but I really, really wanted to get into television. And so we wrote this television show, and we were like, God, we're good at this. Like we should really do something with this. But we didn't really have the resources. We didn't really have the know-how. We didn't really know what to do. And so I got it in my head, though. I said to myself, like, I really would like to be one day a showrunner, because this feels like a perfect synthesis of the things that I like. I went to school for writing and acting. It feels like a good way to kind of, bridge all of that. And so in the meantime, I got cast in this short film that was being made by all these kind of like young, spunky 20 to 30-year-old kind of like crew people and directors and creatives. And I was sort of looking around the whole time I was there, and I was like, wow, this is really, really impressive. I'd never really seen anything like it. These sort of young people who were working at a like ultimate professional capacity. And so I got to look behind the monitor, and I see how beautiful this short film looks. And I instantly realized this is so much better looking than I even dreamed possible. And so I go to my friend who got me on the film, and I say, who's shooting this? And he says, it's this guy, Jake Duggar. And so at lunch, I pull Jake Duggar aside, and I say, hey, man, I'm making a show. I'm making like a web show. And I have a lot of followers. I can definitely get eyes on it. Would you have any interest? And he goes, yeah, send me the script. I say, great. And then at lunch, I go and find the lead producer, and I say, hey, Jake and I are cooking something up. You're going to want to get on board with this. Jake has not signed on in any capacity whatsoever. And he says, great. So I go home the next day, and I call my writing partner. I say, listen, we got to write a 5-episode show in the next 5 days, because I didn't have anything written. I was completely talking out of my ass. So my writing partner and I sat down, and we said, let's write a show about the current moment. And the current moment was COVID, but we didn't want to write directly about COVID. I think it was something that was so broad and all encompassing. There was no way to talk about it in a fresh way. And so we asked ourselves, what really came out of COVID? Like what are the dominant feelings right now? And what we got was the gig economy had really exploded, and the feeling of loneliness and isolation had really become, I think, the most pervasive, feeling that we were all feeling culturally. So we decided to write a show about an extremely lonely gig worker. And we sort of from there leaned into kind of these crime noir elements. We came up with the idea that this was a guy who you could hire to do anything. And I think, and that's kind of where Rabbit came from. You know, we got Jake involved, we got this producer Will involved, and more people kind of joined our team. And you know, by virtue of who got involved, the show turned out a billion times better than I thought it would. And I really credit the decision to kind of go for it to the my roommate at the time. You know, I had been in LA for like 4 or 5 months, and I was like, I feel lost. I feel stagnant. I don't know what to do. You know, like I can't seem to break into any of these writers' rooms. And she had said, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, I want to be a showrunner. And she was like, show run the smallest show you possibly can. And so that's what Rabbit is. It's me show running the smallest show in the world.
I love it so much. And I was going to ask, what was the reason that you decided this should be a web show rather than let's write a pilot and pitch it and see if we can get it developed as a full show? I think you've answered it. I think it's because somebody gave you that wonderful advice. Just start doing the thing you want to do, which is show running. Just create the show on a small scale and dive in. So I think you've already answered it. Was there any other factors that we've missed there? Because I really want to kind of sort of tease this apart. We will get back to the chat in just a moment. Firstly, if you're enjoying today's episode, please do go ahead and subscribe to the channel. That's a great zero-cost way of supporting the Right in the Head mission. It takes you about 2 seconds to click that button. If you want to go the extra mile, write us a comment as well. That will tickle the fancy of the YouTube algorithm, meaning this content shows up for more screenwriters just like me and you. Thank you so much. Back to the chat.
Yeah, we had kind of written, we had written pilots and we'd gone out and pitched pilots before, and it never really seemed to work. We could never really seem to get the people who we were talking to buy into the vision. And I think that's sort of sometimes the issue for people who have a really, really, really specific voice. I think my work is very, very it's very driven by aesthetics. It's very driven by performance. It's very driven like I think the cohesive element of it is part of what I think is the special sauce. So there were so many times when I would be in front of people trying to get them to understand what I meant or was talking about, and I just couldn't get them to get there.
Oh yeah.
And I think
been there.
It's all the time. You know what I mean? And I think like the issue too is that I think like, I came from this super, super kind of like lofty background of like, like all this sort of heady playwriting stuff. And it was really hard for me to explain to studio people like the power of ambiguity, like I was like, don't tell anybody everything, like let people figure things out, like let people think about things. And I think the sort of entertainment industry can be a little allergic to that. And so what I realized was I was like, great, we'll just make the show. And then when we went to go pitch the show afterwards, it was so easy because we didn't need anybody to get it. We like played a couple episodes and we were like, you want more? Because we can do more, I think like what people are interested in the current industry, in my opinion, is ownership of intellectual property that seems valuable. And I think ideas have less value than they used to. I always listen to podcasts about film history and people going into a room and just blowing everyone away with an idea. And I think now people want to own something that's already in progress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, less risk associated, more proof of concept. It's kind of minimizing the downsides to a degree.
Yeah, my theory is just that people aren't really in the business of discovering things anymore. Like I think it's buying things that are in process.
That's interesting. Yeah.
That's my guess. So yeah, I mean, like people sometimes, or often tell me they're like, wow, you really get into it pretty quickly. Like if I have an idea, I will start concepting it into something as soon as possible. And I think that's just via the nature of my belief that, people aren't, looking for the next big thing. They're looking for something that they can take nationwide or take worldwide.
Right. Something you said about the way that you operate the show is you'd run it as close to being, I think you said, a proper show as possible. I would already class it as a proper show, but I know what you mean. So as a writer, what would you say is some of the massive differences between writing on a, let's say, a network show or writing a feature versus writing for a digital show? Have you seen your writers, you being one of them, have you had to make big adjustments for that?
Yeah, I mean, so the thing that we tell people on Rabbit is that we tell all the department heads, this is your opportunity to do your best stuff and your stuff that's the most you. With our directors and our, writers and our costumers, it's like this you'll get the least notes here than you will for the rest of your career. And the people who we hire because we are like obsessed with their creative voice and their creative leaning. And so the ceiling of all these things is myself and my co-showrunner Joseph, and so it's kind of our job to say slightly too far, but in reality we don't really do that very often. And I think what you realize when you get into a bigger budget production, a production with more people above you, is that things get filtered through a bunch of different viewpoints and perspectives, and things get sort of shaped into a more kind of palatable package, which makes sense because they're making something for so many more people. And so what we kind of, always like, tell people on Rabbit is we're like, go as far as you possibly can in the direction that you would like to go in. This is kind of the space for all the weirdos to come out and like really, really, really take big swings. Because you get into when there's more money at stake, there are more opinions that you have to listen to.
Of course, of
It's just a
course.
reality of how money works.
Yeah, and
Um,
on that subject, money, budget, I know a lot of writers that would hear this would be thinking, what if I don't have the budget to do something like this? So,
mhm.
to whatever degree you're comfortable talking about it, what was the budget when you got started with Rabbit? Did you have something squirreled away just for this? Were you fortunate enough to have some funds to throw at it, or was it very much just sort of, let's just bootstrap it?
Yeah, so I feel very comfortable talking about it because I think it's a really interesting and complex kind of part of all of it. So I had been a young adult novelist, and so I had some money squirreled away. And so the idea with Rabbit was we were like, we're going to run and gun it. And so we had a lot of people kind of donating their time or like getting equity in the show itself. And that was kind of our department heads. So the idea that it was like our director, our DP, our like main producers or whatever, everyone kind of, got to share a part in kind of the startup company that was Rabbit. And I said, okay, I'm going to put 10 grand into this because you have to pay the like union trade workers who are associated with the project. You know what I mean? Like, and I think like, like gaffers and lighting people and sound people, you have this kind of impression when you move out to Hollywood and you say to yourself, like, I love movies and I moved out here because I want to tell stories. And you meet these people who like are like union crew workers, and they don't care about your dream. They've seen 100,000 of you come through, and give up and leave. And so,
Right.
and I always sort of, tell people who are coming onto the set, like the crew is not beneath you. The crew owns us. They're they're in charge. And so, I squirreled together. I had like 10 grand together to pay for the crew. I met with my producer. He said, you are going to want to spend 15 grand because if you spend 10 grand, you're going to wish you spent 15. And I said, okay, makes sense. And then, I met with the other producer and she said, well, listen, there's no locations for 15 grand. That I like between our sort of camera crew and lighting crew and sound, that's it. And so she said it should be 19 grand. And I said, okay, we'll go 19 grand. And eventually by the end of the project, by the time we got all the way through post, I think I spent $38,000,
Okay. And
which
that's for the
was
first season?
yeah, for the first 5 episodes. And the first 5 episodes were shot in 5 days. It was one episode per day, which is a hellish schedule. And so here's what I will say. that I think for a lot of people will feel prohibitively expensive. The idea like, okay, there's no way that I could possibly do this. And I think that is correct to a degree. However, there are things that we went in for that you could very easily cut and save a ton of money. We filmed pretty much all with constructed light. We like wanted to bring in lighting people to kind of, create everything. If you shoot with natural light, if you shoot on a shoulder rig, you save, tens of thousands of dollars, I like there's definitely things that we did that were more expensive than maybe we should have or could have. But that was because we settled on a very certain vision for the show. We wanted it to feel kind of like this like crimey, pulpy, kind of a what's the show? Columbo-esque kind
Yeah.
of thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Difficult to get that with natural light.
totally, but yeah, and like, we shot on an Arri Alexa and we shot on some, like lenses from the 70s. And I think like that was another thing we didn't have to do. A lot of people who I know, like every young director out here has a Blackmagic camera, and those are extremely serviceable. But I really do think that if you're going to do something like this, a digital series, the strength of your network is the strength of your project. I think I think my talent as a showrunner, more than writing or acting or producing or anything, is in being able to notice talent in other people and then beg them to work for me. I think, with the director, Max Mikowski, I met him in college and he made the only student film I'd ever liked. And I pulled him aside and I was like, you're going to move to LA and we'll make this work. We'll figure this out. And, years later he did, and we did, and I think, yeah, that's kind of, but yeah, I mean, here's what I'll say as far as like these digital series go, the money, and in film in general, all across the entertainment industry, it's all the money is the big sticking point. Like
Yeah.
nobody
Yeah.
nobody wants to give you any, and it feels like you burn through it at an unbelievable pace.
And in your case, you also attached some known actors as well, which I
Hmm.
was very impressed by, because I've been through this process of trying to attach talent to a project, and it's hellishly difficult. So, can you talk me through that? Was it just people that you knew, or did you go through agencies? How did you go about attaching these names?
Yeah, so it's kind of a one domino at a time kind of thing. For season one, it was extremely difficult. For season one, I had to rely exclusively on people who I went to school with. And then, I met with my producer, Will, and he told me, he was like, listen, this guy dispatches in one room. And you could shoot this guy out in 2 hours. So you should try to get a name. And so we hired a casting director who was like, here's 10 people who I think maybe would do it, And it was COVID and things were so slow. And I think it was like, it was a good paycheck for a very limited amount of work. And I think also the concern that name actors have when working on something like this is that it's going to be shitty. It's going to be shitty, and it will devalue their stock as an actor. And so what you have to assure people about is three things: the script, which, they can get by reading it. Number two is the DP. You have to assure them that it will look good. And the third is the editor. If people feel assured about those three things, they will feel a lot more comfortable. And when people, it's rare, but when people reach out to me to act in their projects, those are the first three things I ask about: the script, the DP, and the editor. Um, and um, and so we eventually got in contact with Ken Davidian, and we went to lunch with him, and we just like begged him for 2 hours. It was very, very undignified. We like sat across from him, and we kind of just tried to sell him on this grand vision of the show. And this was just a few years ago. I was 24. I was with the director, Max, and Max at the time was, I think, 22. And I think we had no fucking idea how anything worked. And we were so filled with idealism that I think it was a little bit infectious. Like
Mm.
we
Hmm.
had, I would never do that ever again. You know what I mean? Like I would never, make the sales pitch that I made at that time. And he said he'd do it, and yeah, and from there, once we had Ken, then we sort of like pulled on connections to bring in a little, I don't, we in our sort of upcoming episodes, we have two really, really, really phenomenal people. So we got Don Roy King, who directed SNL for 20 years, and his daughter is a longtime friend of mine, and we read a scene together when I was in New York, and I was like, "You are a unbelievable actor. Like you're one of the best actors I've ever met. Have you ever thought about acting?" And he was like, "Well, I can't audition. I'm Don Roy King. He's got like 19 Emmys. He's not going to go, sit in a room."
Of
And I was
course,
like, well,
of
I was
course.
like, I got one thing that you definitely would not have to audition for. Um, and having him and having Ken, I think then we would reach out to agencies and we would say, and you have to have a little bit of a connection, you know what I mean? So we had for our second season Suzanne Cryer, who is phenomenal, Yale drama grad. She was in the sitcom A Guy and a Girl in a Pizza Shop, and or Two Guys and a Girl in a Pizza Shop,
Right, with
and
Ryan Reynolds.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And she did Silicon Valley. She's the best actor I think I've ever worked with in my life. And she was in a film that a friend produced, and so I just kind of I that's what goes in the email to the agent. I said like saw this, thought Suzanne was incredible. She had a great experience on that film. This person is, a dear friend of mine. Here's the pay, here's the day, here's the script. And more than often that doesn't work out. And I do think having the first season of Rabbit helps enormously, because you basically get to say like, do you want to be on this show?
Yeah,
Rather than
you've
saying,
done the thing. You've got the
yeah, like,
proof.
and so like we would also, we'd say whenever we reach out to like big names, we'd say this would be a humongous get for us, although it would not be our first. Here are the people who have worked on Rabbit, and it's nice too. I have a lot of friends from school who started to get like a little famous or started to get in good projects, and then I could just kind of be like, "You always said you'd do Rabbit at some point, and now it's fucking time."
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love the sort of entrepreneurship and that innocence of youth, just going to this meeting and just blurting out this optimism and hoping it's infectious. I think all of us could learn something from that. I want to go back to that moment actually, because you're 24. I think you said the director's 22. Just to put a fine point on this, I assume that means neither one of you is particularly established or maybe even represented at that point. Probably not too many credits to your name. I'm trying to drill this in because I
Yeah,
want I want people to hear this and know that you can make stuff happen.
totally. Yeah, I mean, so Ken Davidian seemed very interested in the fact that I was a novelist. And I think we kind of skirted around the fact that they were young adult novels. Like we didn't really like bring that up so much, but yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, like people are always sort of like amazed when I say this, but Rabbit was the first filmed thing I ever did. You know what I mean? Like it was the first time I ever put anything on film. I had never done it before, and Max had done a few student films. Luckily, Jake Duggar, the DP, was really, really, really was a really working DP. Had done quite a bit and had quite a few connections. And our producer was extremely experienced. Both those guys, also young guys, but who, some crew guys have been working since they're like 14. And so, but what you're saying is absolutely correct, is that like we had no credits, no experience. Yeah, like I had the management that I got out of college, which could do nothing for me because they're like, I've never heard of this. Um, yeah, no, I mean like we had really nothing but just like unlimited energy. And I think like we also like at that age, I think felt so desperate and inferior. And I think like that, like desperation and inferiority, like really, really, really helped us because we were just willing to do things that other people weren't, you
That's the
know?
tagline from the episode today. Just be desperate and inferior.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
all
Like,
gonna work out.
it was like, well, we'll try as hard as we possibly can, and our self-esteem can't get worse, so we'll ask for things that no one would ever ask for, you know. And yeah, it was, I mean, like, Rabbit is a show that's built on us just being like, please, 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 like,
Mm.
and it's not dignified, but I think that's a big lie about film, is that it's a dignified process or experience.
It's, in my experience, which is limited, it's been messy. It's been
Hmm.
creative and fun, but it's been messy. And, to that point, you mentioned a moment ago that it was kind of a run and gun experience. I think one of the other obstacles that, at least in my mind, would stop me doing something like this is thinking about things like paperwork and permission and where can I shoot and all of this. I overthink everything, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners do as well. So, can you speak to that? Was it hell on earth trying to get the right permission, the locations, the just the logistics of the whole
I'm
thing?
I'm I'm sure it would have been if we tried. Like I think like here's the thing. Here's what I'll say. And this is the most practical advice I can give to young screenwriters. Um do not write whatever your thing is in extremely specialized locations. Um Bars, warehouses, diners, just don't do it. Because like there's some of these on Peerspace or Gigster that you could find to rent, but these people who rent out these places know how unique and in demand they are. Like everybody wants to film a scene in a bar or diner because that's what Tarantino does, and they will absolutely scalp you for it.
Yeah, the
There was
Tarantino rate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, and what I will say about Rabbit is if you watch it closely, if you really watch it closely, you slowly start to put together that we are shooting the same parking lot and the same kind of studio 100 different directions.
Mm,
So like in the first episode, the very first scene, Rabbit's on a roof. That is the roof of a building where we shot the bar scene. And all the parking lot scenes are the same parking lots. Like the phone scene is the same, like the majority of Rabbit was filmed all on the same lot by this studio that couldn't get anybody to rent anything there. And they had an abandoned vape shop, they had a bar, and they had a rooftop, and parking lots. And we just filmed it all there. And like we have this episode where they walk to a liquor store. That is the liquor store conjoined to that parking lot. Like, and everything is pretty much stolen. Because that's what you have to do. You know what I mean? That was our only option. And then with season two, we brought on this location manager, and he was like, "Well, you could film at this place, and then that'll be that amount, and the permit will be that amount." And I was like, "Permit?" And I was like, "Well, we'll be filming inside." And he was like, "Yeah, well, if you want to do it legit, you need a permit anytime you film anything in Los Angeles, even if it's
right,
inside."
right.
And I was like, "That's fucking unbelievable!" Like that feels anti-art to me that I have to pay like $1,000 to film inside of a building that I'm paying to rent in. Anyway, yeah, I think like if we had tried to do it the legit way with season one, um, it would have been a night, and we would not have been able to afford it. Like the budget would have spiraled out of control. With season two, it was crazy too. Like trying to do stuff outside and being like, wow, like this runs our budget up like an insane amount to film 2 nights outside. Like and so what I'll say is write stuff if you want to start. Write stuff that takes place in locations that you have access to. Like think about the coolest places that you are able to get into. Maybe you work somewhere cool and they're there, they like you, or maybe you're in the inside of apartments, easy. I think people try to write with the training wheels off when they kind of start and they're like diners and, bars and all that, those people will screw you, at least in LA. I've made movies in Florida. You make movies in Florida, you go to a bar, you're like, can we film a movie here? And they're like, a movie? Like, of course, like our bar will be in the movie,
I had a similar experience when I lived in London. You could go to most sort of privately owned cafes or restaurants and say, "Can we just film a scene here?" And they'd be, "Absolutely. If we're going to be in the scene, that's great."
you, you,
The challenge though
you,
was background noise because they wouldn't clear the place out. They would just
of
say, "You
course.
guys can come and film here."
Yeah. Yeah, well, and yeah, that's absolutely, and I think like people in LA are so desensitized. You know what I mean? Everybody in LA knows what you can get for a day of filming, and it's $1,000 at the minimum, usually. You know, and but you go somewhere else, and they're just excited by the idea that they might get to watch something that their building is in, which is adorable. Like that's lovely.
So you mentioned that it was 5 days to scramble together the episodes, whether you did it in 5 days or not. I know that was the initial challenge, and then you said 5 days to shoot as well, one episode per day.
Yes.
What was post production? How long from manically shooting to we have a finished product? Let's drop it on YouTube.
Yeah, 5 days to write it, 5 days to film it. And we made both of those deadlines ish, I think I remember the last day on set, we filmed like an extra 3 hours, which was very stressful because it's this like phone call scene and Rabbit's bleeding out and it's the big emotional moment. It's the last day on set and I'm
No spoilers.
tired and exhausted. Yeah. So no spoilers. It was tough. It was crazy, and that was a moment where I was like, man, I'm never going to cast myself in anything ever again. Like the idea of being like on set and like burning my own money because I was had to act better. But the post-production process was long. I think we finished filming in October of 2021, and the show came out in like mid 2022. So I think we spent like 8 months on it. And I mean, like we cut, a trailer in 5 episodes. But we were cutting it with a friend, like he would just come over and he would come over to our house and we would cut the show together and then he and my roommates would just smoke like tons of weed. And like we had this giant like Rottweiler in the house that's just always barking at the like didn't understand what television was. So we'd be trying to edit while this dog is trying to get into the computer.
This is a
Those
scene from a Tarantino movie that you're
Yeah, this
describing
I
right
know
now.
these were really the good old days. Like the idea of like I don't like I think a lot of people watch Rabbit and they kind of get the impression they're like, oh wow, this must be some kind of like Nepo baby shit, like this is like, like how does somebody put together something like this? And like what I always tell people is like it like fighting for your life is what it was. You know what I mean? Like, just like editing it in our shitty apartment with our barking dog and like begging Ken Davidian and like shooting 11 pages a day and like crying in the car, all that.
Hashtag filmmaking, right?
Hmm.
So now you've got this finished product and it's on YouTube. I've looked at the first few episodes. You've got decent plays on your channel. So how did that come about? Was there a lot of promoting? Did it happen organically? I'm a marketing guy. I am as a day job marketing consultant. So very, very fascinated by this. Was it hours on social media or just sending it out to friends and family? How did the popularity arise?
So yeah, it was a lot of cutting clips for TikTok, so we cut a ton of clips for TikTok. This was before Reels was cool or good. And so we just like blasted some we would cut sorry, 2 clips every week. And so 2 clips every week of Rabbit, and I would sort of do my other kind of content in between. And I was sort of at the time kind of cresting a nice kind of viral moment. So I was able to kind of pull in a lot of attention with that. Although I will be honest, I think TikTok had kind of ruined my perception of what a view is and is worth. Like I had videos on TikTok that were getting like millions and millions of views or like 100,000 views in an hour. And so I kind of expected Rabbit to just go like super, super Saiyan viral.
Right. Right. Yeah,
And
TikTok changed everything with that. Their algorithm is very different.
Yeah. And so what actually ended up happening was we put the show out and, I clipped everything as best I could. And then I paid for YouTube ads. I ran it as an ad for a while, but that was pretty much all I knew how to do at the time. I didn't know how to get more people to watch it. That was before I, worked in marketing. And I had this moment where Rabbit, the character, is asexual. And so it was interesting. We started to get this kind of big groundswell in that community and on Tumblr. And so it kind of sort of started to build outside of our pushing it between, people who were in that community and wanted to talk about it. And so, yeah, like it really started to kind of develop a community of its own. And sort of the best advice that I can give to anyone who wants to make things and wants to start on their own is that the best thing that you can do is develop a community that talks independently of you having to start the conversation. Like if you really, really, really want to have your internet moment, you have to create a fan base that will talk about you when you're not there. Like I think like nobody in the world is better at this than pop stars. They create like stan communities. And so it was very interesting in the way that this kind of community formed around Rabbit, these kind of Rabbit fans. And I think it's tough. Those people are starving because there's only 5 episodes and they're, like 10 minutes. So they've had like 3 years and 50 minutes to, pour over. So, excited to give them a little more soon. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Would you say here's the $1 million question. So you've invested this money to get the show made, so 30,000 something. There's more time involved than we can possibly count. It's a lot of energy. Then there's money for marketing, promoting, YouTube ads, as you said. Would you recommend it? Overall, has it been net positive for you as a creator? And if it has, can you give specifics? Like, what's the return on investment, if I can put it in very entrepreneurial language?
Yeah. In dollars, it's negative tens of thousands of dollars.
I figured that would be the
Yeah.
case. Yeah.
I've never made any money off Rabbit. I keep putting more money into Rabbit, and my family is aghast. But I think here's the thing. I do believe it'll come back at some point, and I do believe it'll come back in ways that maybe are not intrinsically linked to the show itself. Even if I don't sell the show, for instance, like even if we make, we put out season 2 and then we, wrap it up with our, kind of like El Camino-esque kind of, finisher. And Rabbit never sells. We can never get a network to decide to take a swing on it. Having a body of work that is extensive and complete is the most valuable thing that I have ever done for myself as a creator, because it took me from the realm of the hypothetical into the realm of the tangible. I think like I know a lot of screenwriters who have won great awards and have been on all these lists and have great management and dunk on me for not having ever sold anything. They're like, I mean, not in a good natured, good hearted way, of course. But nothing they've ever written has ever gotten made. They've never put the practice into the realm of the tangible, and they're phenomenal screenwriters and they're incredible, but the industry's in a weird place. the benefit of having something like Rabbit is having a body of work to be able to show people. And I think like it's the place where me and all of my friends kind of get to go to prove that we are serious. Like prove that we're trained, like prove that we can make a product of inherent quality. And I think it has earned me a level of respect that I think would absolutely be unfounded for someone who has worked in the traditional industry as little as I have. And so it's interesting. I went on book tour last month, and every time when they would read my bio, they would mention Rabbit, and people would cheer. In which they would not cheer for the book or whatever. And I sort of started to realize as I was going place to place that most of these people were Rabbit fans who were sort of
That is hilarious.
enduring a conversation about my book so that they could ask, "Are you making more Rabbit?" And I think that's beautiful. I think to have an indication of what my voice is as a writer, as a artist is invaluable. Um, it's startup funds, like it's the money you put into a business to get the business up and running. Because I know so many people who like run around or walk around LA and go to parties and sort of desperately try to tell you what their voice is, or what they plan to be, or what they plan to do. And the longer you live in LA, the more that just kind of a little bit turns into buzzing. I think like what you have to do, and it's the same thing like trying to sell pilots versus having Rabbit and going into rooms and being like, this is what it is. I think you just can't explain your vision to anybody. I just don't think it ever really cultivates in the same way that the product does.
And I would say, especially with comedy, and having watched Rabbit, it's dark, but it is comedy, and I have this struggle because I write comedy, and so much of it comes down to the vision that I can see in my head, which is even down to silly things like at what point you cut to the next scene, the next line. How long is that pause that the actor's going to give? What is that sound effect that's going to accent that joke so nicely? None of that can really be included on the page. You can do as much as possible. You can be a phenomenal screenwriter, but you're right. There's still going to be a gap between the page and your actual vision of what this is going to be and why it's going to be funny.
Absolutely. And there's so much comedy that is the that is done by the actor and by the editor, like you said. With Rabbit, we have this, which is probably our most famous line in Rabbit, where this guy is pretending to be gay and he's hired Rabbit to be his fake boyfriend. And Rabbit says, for a guy who's been pretending to be gay, you're pretty homophobic. And this guy says it's internalized homophobia. And Rabbit says it's not if you're not gay, motherfucker. And this guy says it's internalized homophobia. And what we had written in the script was that this character is so demure and awkward and ashamed of the position that he's in. This undignified position, pretending to be gay for 10 years to like try and get his friend to fall in love with him. Like this is the most undignified position you can be in. And we cast this guy, Ted, who is my best friend of many, many, many years. And he comes in and plays this character with so much dignity. Like the idea that he thinks he's a spy, and it was very hard to finish takes with him because he played this character with almost zero shame. And I think it was so much more authentic, and so the episode reads so much better than the script does, because the script, you find this kind of, whatever, but in the watching of it, you're like, oh my God, this guy's a fucking psycho, and I think like that is, that is kind of the lightning in the bottle nature of, casting and performance and capturing and editing, like bringing this thing to life in a way that's just not, in my opinion, like I have read a lot of really great comedy scripts, but it's really hard to get the vision, you know? Um, and if you think about the majority of the studio comedies made in the last like 20 or 30 years were sold by people who were already incredibly established names in comedy. You know what I mean? There's
Of course.
very rare is the comedic film that isn't a Apatow, Adam Sandler, you know, Paul
Yeah.
Feig, you know, like these are because it's hard to explain comedy and it's hard to put it in the script. So people go, I know these guys are funny, you know, I just know that they'll figure it out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So here's a question, and this is very personal to a situation that I'm in right now. So actually, it's funny because sometimes at the end of the episodes, we do a question for a coach, and the guest asks me a question. I'm actually going to flip that. I'm going to ask you a question. So recently, it has been made abundantly clear to me that I should make a finished product, right? Not just the script. Three options have been talked about by various guests on this show. So, short film, proof of concept, or 20-minute pilot episode of a show that I want to make. And now, in today's episode, digital series. So, 5 episodes, a few minutes each. Do you think any of those options has a stronger chance of showcasing your work? Do you think the main point is to just get on and do something? Obviously, you might have a slight bias because you did the short series.
Yeah.
What would you say to that? Because I'm in that predicament right now.
Yeah, I will say, here's what I'll say, okay? This is just my perspective, which is limited. Um,
It's
Here we
more
go.
informed than my perspective.
Yeah,
So,
we'll see. You know, here we go. Short film has become, in my opinion, a little bit of a dirty word. You know, it used to be that you could book good rep or get bought off of short films, but now studios want directors who have done features, which it's inconceivable to me that the bar keeps moving further and further away. But that's whatever it is.
right. Have you
Um,
directed your own trilogy yet? Because if
yeah,
not,
yeah,
we're
yeah,
not.
yeah, yeah. I'm like, ah, shit. I could make 3 movies. Yeah, like so I think short films you could I mean like the short films give you the benefit of being able to run the festival route, like meet other people, but my and you know, proof of concept can be great if you are really, really, really confident in your technical ability, you know, like in your ability to put something together that like will wow a room. Um, I think the benefit to digital series is the fact that you can, it is a product outside of what it would like to be. You know, like we would like Rabbit to at one day be a whatever television show, you know, it's whatever network, whatever streamer television show. However, Rabbit exists as a product on its own. And it has its own community built around it, its own fan base, because it is episodic work, you know, and we were able to get it there through a ton of fucking work. I will say that the hard thing about it is that in order to make something episodic, you do have to sprint harder and work harder because where you're making 55 pages of content rather than, you know, 15 or 10. Um, However, I will say it gives you the opportunity to show your range. You know, we have episodes of Rabbit that are like sitcom comedy plots, and we have some of them that are more crimey, more moralistic kind of, you know, like meditations on what it means to be, you know, and like I think the nice thing about Rabbit is that he's like, or the episodic format in general is that you get to show different sides of your voice. You get to show different sides of your artistic interest and curiosity. And so I think like if you have okay, I'm about to wrap it up. Here we go. If
Conclude the
you
TED
want,
talk.
yeah, if you want to make something, a specific something, you know, like a feature, you're like, this is my baby. This is the thing I want to get made. You should make a short film and you should go run the festival circuit. And if you have good rep, you should make a proof of concept. Those things are kind of the same thing or can be the same thing. If you would like to build your stock as a artist, if you would like to become a known like a known and understood voice in writing, you should make a series, a digital series. Because the short film, the proof of concept, that will tease the project. And a digital series will tease your voice, your career. That's my expectation, my hope. Yeah.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. I like how you summed that up at the end. So I talk a lot about goals on this podcast. It's very important to me. And I think you've summed it up nicely. It depends what your goal is. What do you want this thing, this final product to do? Is it to go on that circuit? Is it to look for reps or to promote your vision or to tease it, like you said? Or is it to say, look, I can write an entire series and produce it and put it online and grow a following? All of that is, I think it's proof of so much more than the other two options, especially the part where you grow a following for that series. That's huge and very, very difficult to do. I think that's probably what scares me the most about that, is that I would shoot the series, sink some money into it, and then just no one would end up watching it. That's
Totally. Yeah.
quite
I
terrifying.
mean,
And I would add to that my fear and I'm just going to be honest, my loathing of posting on social media. I don't do it
yeah.
other than posting these episodes on YouTube. I just don't do it. So what am I going to do with this series if I film it, if I, make the whole thing and it's wonderful? How do I get people to watch it? That's what's on my mind almost every time I think about doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think like that is, I think the the big thing that I think in the film industry we're all trying to pretend is not real. Like that there's two elements. There's product and distribution. Like it's two halves of the process. And I know so many people who only give a fuck about product. But the question is, like, yeah, like if you sink all your money into something, like you have to have an idea of how to get it out there. I think we've talked a lot about, for season two, my platform's a lot bigger than it was with season one, but like ways in which we're going to get the word out that are a little bit more creative. So like we're gonna host like screenings around LA. We're gonna do a little bit of a tour. We're going to print ads for the company that Rabbit works for and like flyer the whole city. Like there are ways in which you can be creative about it, but you do have to. I think if you're like, I'm going to put this on YouTube, I made this series, I put all this money into it, boom, it's out there. The odds that a bunch of people see it and are like, oh fuck yeah, this rules, and just like send it around.
I've worked in marketing way too long. That's not how it works.
Yeah, it used to, man. It used to be you post something on YouTube and like, if it was interesting enough or funny enough, like 2 million people would show up, but that is just not the way the internet works anymore. There's too much noise.
Yeah. Well, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. Thank you again for your time. Where can people go to learn more about you? Of course, if they want to check out Rabbit, where's all the links? What can we put in the description?
Totally. On all social media, I am at Kyle Prue. And if you want to find Rabbit, just look up Kyle Prue Rabbit on YouTube. Because if you just type Rabbit, that's a famous animal.
You'd be doing very well SEO wise if you could beat rabbits to the top of the rabbit search results.
We beat real rabbits on YouTube for about 1 week, and that was pretty big.
Rabbits were having a bad week that week.
I kept posting, "Fuck you, real rabbits! Like, take that." And so I have a book that just came out called How to Piss Off Men, and that's wherever books are sold. That's like a manual comedy type thing. And that's it for me.
I love it. Love it. Okay, I will let you go. Have a great rest of the day. And again, thank you for your time. I've learned so much doing this, and I'm now going to go away and think about what I'm going to do for my short digital series. I think you've swayed me on it.
Very cool. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, and I can't wait to check out more of Rabbit. I'll talk to you soon.
Great. Thanks, man.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Right in the Head podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. You know you want to. It's a great zero-cost way to support the mission we are on here at Right in the Head to share wellness information with the screenwriting community. If you want to go ahead and leave us a comment as well, it will please the YouTube algorithm. Therefore, this content will get shown to more screenwriters around the world. Finally, go ahead and click on the videos being suggested up here, maybe down here, depends on the end plate, and we will see you there. Wow, this is awkward.